Hello, Lama. How are you doing?
I'm fine, Mr. Simon. How you doing?
No, we're fine. We're all right. There's so many things happening in the world, and
Oh,
it's common to say that, but there are lots of things happening. And I thought we would use our very good time to talk about the secrets of the Lamasery.
okay.
I don't mean you tell people the secret, but what I mean is that when you're guardians of um, history or truth, then
Right.
you have to guard it. And I was thinking, do you ever see a time when the things that you guard will be it'll be okay to share it with people? Do you ever see that in the future?
Well, we're really hoping for, enough people becoming conscious. And as you know, the neat thing that goes with consciousness is, how do you want to say it? A more mature spiritual people and more accountable, more trusting. Um, when that happens, yeah, I can see that. We've been talking about that for years. As a matter of fact, we're hoping, Simon, as you are, that we're moving into the age where everything will open up in the next probably decade or so. That's what we're really hoping for.
Because it's not just about when most people think about secrets, they think about books or something that's written down, but often it's objects, it's
Right,
items that have to be hidden
right.
because it would be too dangerous to release them into a world. One thinks about the guy that created dynamite, and he created it because it was to help miners who were in the caverns, and of course they took it and made explosives out of it. So you know you could be sitting on something that could be used for either good or evil.
That's right.
Do you think that the Lama Suri is in a spiritual war with other organizations that are not so spiritual and are fighting over the balance of the earth?
Well, the Lamasery has been feeling that for some time, actually, Simon. And it's been times when things were so dark. You know, everybody looks at the darkness on the earth now, but there were times where things were so dark that, when you look at during the reign of Genghis Khan and Kublai Khan, things were so dark, we kind of felt like, we were kind of it. And, since the 17th century, and we moved into second gear of ascension, you can see people waking up all the time. I know in your organization, you've seen people wake up by the thousands. And, and they're reaching out. I really believe within every, uh, most people, they incarnate, they're really good people. And you and me know that there's a lot of things that influence people that can change that. If they have good parents, that's a good start. If they're part of an organization that has their best interest, that's the next wave. Unfortunately, even here in America, as a lot of academia has been taken over by people who had an agenda, that the agenda was more important than the people's interest. In other words, instead of actually educating them, there was an agenda that they wanted to impart that was much more important than the education itself. And I believe we've been moving into that arena for at least 20 to good 30 years. And it's not going to reverse itself overnight. I think one of the biggest changes in America we've seen in the educational field that's probably positive is, instead of us, teaching people, the younger generation, oh, you have to academically be this or that,
Mm.
we've seen a shift to what I would refer to as the certification education that I believe has stemmed a lot from online. And with the certification, They're actually delivering the niche that the person really needs without all the extra flutter that goes along with it, right? And because of that, we're seeing the price structure very reasonable for somebody if they want to learn how to do a computer, they want to learn how to fix the computer, market with a computer, build an e-commerce site. All of that, when you think about what things would normally cost in traditional business and what all that would entail as far as labor and bricks and mortar and everything like that, there's a real shift. And I think at the same time, I mean, my second son just graduated from a university a couple of years ago, and he was very conservative in nature. And we talked a lot about what he could and could not say on the campus. And, you know, he really felt that there is an early brewing of a conservative wave that is coming to campus, but we kind of really feel like that's probably a decade away before that's even balanced, before we even see a balance. In other words, you know, it's hard to share ideas when people not only do they want to attack the message, but more important, they want to attack the messenger. There seems to be a lot of aggression, and when that's in full force, to honor your first question, that's probably when the Lamasery felt like, you know, when civil rights are almost at their lowest, that's when the Lamasery has felt like, wow, you know, we felt like we were fighting alone a lot of times in those ages, right? And it seems like that they're trying to create another wave of that. But we see this wave differently. And this wave is more of a last dying effort to take a stand, almost like they're trying to get rooted in sand, but the sand keeps moving underneath their feet and they can't get rooted. I mean, here we are getting ready to go back into Mercury retrograde again, which the Lamasery refers to that as the yin cycle. And the energy shifts. And you can already feel, since this full moon, the spiritually awakened, like your people, they are aware of the change early, where the unconscious person is more aware of it when it becomes peak, like September 21st, 24th, right? When it's supposed to be peak. We already see technology being messed with. You can see symptoms of what I refer to as creative driving, where people are cutting people off on the highway with their cars. You start hearing more sirens coming from rescue and from the police. All of these are symptoms that we're moving into that inner flow. So natural flow of the chi up the human being is up the back and down the front. But in retrograde Mercury, it feels like that shifts and goes the other way. And so people start to spin their wheels. So right now, for this cycle, the next 3 to 6 weeks, the challenge is going to be grounding and focus for even the spiritually minded people. It's going to be a real challenge. So one of the things I love about Tai Chi Gong, you know, when I first started on this path, it happened out of the illnesses that I had. The illnesses drove my spirit out of my body into an expanded consciousness way. And from about the age of 12 and 13 till about 19, I thought getting out of my body all the time, having a bilocation experience was where it was at, right? But then when I got to Tibet, they were teaching me, no, little Rasaji, it's all about how much of your spirit and your soul can you actually bring into this physical temple? Because only then will our spiritual facility begin to operate another 10 or 15%, which most people would call mastership.
Mm. Yes, that's so many good points you've brought there. So when you look at the Lamasery, where you are spiritually attacked on all sides, isn't it very tempting to say we will hunker down and we will be separate from the world because the world is full of corruption? And did that ever occur? And was there an argument in the Lamasery that you had to actually get back out into the world and fight to change it? Or what was the debate like?
You know, I actually had a personal experience along those regards. When I got ready to leave the Lamasery after training there for about 4 years, my gut feeling was, I was in my early 20s, and my gut feeling was, man, I have found Shangri-La. And
Oh, I'm losing you. Hopefully it'll come back.
felt like I had found a spiritual family that I never knew before. Oh my God, living up in the Himalayas for, as long as I did, and looking every night into the sky, when you're at 8,000 elevation, it looked like a planetarium. It looked like you could reach out and grab a star, right?
Yeah.
So why in the world would this guy want to leave this environment? And I remember the head lama coming up to me and saying, well, you're supposed to, we're in the age of energy, movement, but also communication. And we're not in the golden age, little Rasaji, where you go into a cave and stare in your navel and chew on alfalfa sprouts, right? We're not in that age. We're in an age where we're actually supposed to be coming out and sharing it. We get this knowledge, but how valuable is the knowledge if we can't share it and help humanity evolve? So this has always been, so they said, you're going to have an incarnation that's going to seem very ordinary. Well, I would think in some sense it's been anything but ordinary, but they told me that I would have 3 sons. And first of all, I mean, I hadn't even met my first wife yet. So the idea that this was going to happen, I realized today, because of that, it was very important for me to be able to communicate with students the last 4 decades, is because of not only the physical, but the spiritual relationship I've had. I have a 30-year-old, a 27-year-old, and 11-year-old. And I don't have to tell you, you and Becky are parents too. There's no owner's manual for being a parent, right?
Mm-hmm.
And they have been 3 of my best teachers. They say in the Lamasery, the job of a spiritual parent is to protect the natural divinity of a child. You think about what's being done to our children on the planet right now, and how much of a contrast that statement is, that it is our job to first and foremost protect the natural divinity, because it is believed that if it is protected, it would naturally evolve and eventually go through the Kundalini experience and the second birth experience and evolve into higher consciousness. But it is also the children's job to liberate the parents, to keep us in a childlike mindset where we're more attuned to spirit. So to answer your question, there's been times in the Lamasery where different lamas would say, I think we should be hunkered down, as you say, and more stay around the Lamasery. There's also been times where different lamas felt we should go out. To speak to that, this is the first time any lama was chose to have a global spokesperson for the Lamasery. So this kind of tells you is probably the real key to your answer, is what we feel that we're in right now.
Thank you. And when we look at, I hope our conversation is going to be interesting for the audience who might not have, I hope so, that might not have a grasp of where we're going to go now. Most people understand the air that they breathe as air that they breathe. They don't appreciate that these are elements and energies that can be moved and manipulated. So where's the fine line between those people who practice magic and what they do, and a spiritual group of people who also from the outside appear to do magic, but it is not coming from the same place? What is the difference between an organization that practices magic and can make something disappear genuinely, and a spiritual group that can make something disappear? What's the difference, Lama?
Well, it's a good question. You know, I think the short answer is the respect for creation itself and how it was originally designed. That's number one. So let me give you an example of what I mean by that. We know one of the greatest super masters of all time, no matter how someone feels about him, was Master Rabbi Jesus. We know the powers that scriptures tell us that he had. We also remember him cursing the fig tree as he walked through the garden. And then basically God the Father imparted on his mind was, why are you trying to speed up the natural formation that I designed for it to take a certain amount of time for this fig tree to fully mature? Why don't you leave my fig tree alone? Well, Christ knew that he had the power. He had demonstrated it, and he could have sped that process up. But the key to that answer, which is also, I think, the key to your answer, was, would it have been for a greater good? Would it have been for a greater good? I have seen, as you know, from my journeys in India and Tibet, I have seen masters alter everything, including all the elements of nature. I've seen people walk on water. I've seen them walk on air as if it was a stairway up a mountain, right? I have actually seen a master manifest what I call Arkara yoga, which is supposed to be one of the highest yogas in India, where it says basically you choose your reality, right? I've seen them come up to me with elephant done and put their hands together, and all of a sudden it was fruit, you know? Now, these were masters of different sect. They were not out of the lamasery. The lamasery always taught us, like, what is the greater good? How much is it in line with the greater good and the original design of the creation? Now, one thing that the lamasery has known for a long time, that this experience we call chi, if people were to define it and say, well, I want to know, Lama Rasaji, how does God's love feel? I mean, I know that God's love is unconditional, but how does it feel? Well, when you're in the middle of a Tai Chi Gong section and you begin to feel your whole being covered with this electromagnetic energy, and that electromagnetic energy is pulsing through your hands. One of the things that makes Tai Chi Gong so powerful is then within 20 minutes, people are feeling this energy. And once you feel it, you can't sweep that under the carpet. You can't unknow knowledge. If I'm gaining knowledge simultaneously with experience, then I have brought the spirituality right to the ground. I have now not only spiritualized my mind and my spirit, but I have also now started to spiritualize my body. You talked about breathing and different things. When we're breathing energy, according to the lamas, that it's like having a biological experience with the divine. If people have thinks that they've wanted to know what God's love feels like, it's pretty darn close. It's pretty darn close.
Thank you. Where do we draw the line, or where do you guys draw the line between respecting the rights of an individual to choose his or her way and not trying to influence?
Right.
And yet, if you don't influence, you don't impart teaching. Do you say that you only teach those who ask it of you? Or do you say that we've reached a point on the earth now where the message has to be given out?
That is a real powerful question. And for the most sense, the first part of your question has been so. When I look over what I have learned about the history of the Lamasery for the last 3,000 years, when I realized that most of the lamas never identified themselves in history, and when they did, they would choose 1, 2, maybe 3 different individuals to work with, and that was it. For the most part, outside of someone sitting next to a lama and feeling a little warm and fuzzy in some of this chi, they wouldn't even know that this person next to them was a lama or any different than anybody else. So we were so passive about people coming to us and finding us. And that was my way. That was how I did it. It was through out of the body, spiritually searching that I found the master. But also, isn't it interesting that when I was looking, he was already there?
Yes.
And so the key of it is as we grow spiritually and consciously, we know that this is an ebbing flow of how everything works, right? We know that during Master Rabbi Jesus' time, which was considered the Piscean age, it was that feeding the people were important. And people could make the case today that there's still enough starving going on all over the planet that we still need to feed the people. But there's a stronger case to be made of teaching people how to fish. And we're in the Aquarian age. And because of that, teaching the people how to fish also means mentorship. It means not, one of my strongest definitions today of love is sticking around. People talk a lot about, 5D and ascension, and everything's going to go into a certain energy field and poof, everything's going to be done and fixed. There's some people out there making those claims. But there was also a statement made in ancient scripture where it says, death is the dreary back door to the other side. There is a door of glory for those who overcome, and that door swings both ways. And that tells us there are souls on the planet, including you, including me. I'm at least aware of 6 different existences. People could make an argument, are you talking reincarnation? I said, all I can say is I have a conscious awareness of being in at least 6 different other existences, whether people want to call that reincarnation or not. I'm just fully aware of it. When I think about this, this, I know this. Not all souls are aged the same. There are more souls that have been here many a time. This is not by any sense of mean yours and mine's first rodeo. And we know that. And we know that 10 times over. So that is another really definition. In other words, the more conscious a person is coming into this physical existence, realizes who they are, and they still came, there's no other thing you can call that than compassion and love. There's no other word for that than that. And the key of it, I remember a statement Master Rabbi Jesus said. He said, if you knew what I knew and you did what I did, you would turn your head and walk away. And he was speaking to the spiritual loneliness that sometimes conscious people experience when sometimes they don't have someone like you and me and other people like us to relate to. It becomes a spiritual loneliness, if you will, right? One of the things I'm the most excited about with what you're doing, Simon, with your people, and what we both are doing on the My Patriots Network, is we are creating an opportunity for a spiritual family to interact and to share so that we can help lift people up that wants to go. But it's still, they got, you and me both know, we can't do the work for them. They got to do the work themselves.
Yeah, and I think most of them know that and aware that. The problem is, it's those who are unawake and unaware. And at the moment, there's a theme which the white hats or the white knights are putting out, which is President Trump is not coming back. End of story. And one of the reasons they put that story out is that if anybody in officialdom said that Trump was coming back, so many people would just sit back in their armchair and say, oh, well, I don't have to do anything then. If he's coming back, I can just take it easy. And so it's really about, I think, making people responsible for not just their own decisions, but responsible for actually deciding if in this lifetime they are going to wake up and they're going to see the truth, or whether they don't and they're going to have another opportunity at a later date.
Well,
come round.
I think you are on top of something that is so powerful. And actually, I've been teaching this for probably 30 out of the 40 years I've been teaching the very thing. I also think potentially from a market point of view, you just tap what is the potential of the biggest market of awakening we could have. I believe that people today sit in religious institution in the neighborhood of about 10 to 20% of any congregation anywhere that are praying and meditating more than the person sitting up at the pulpit that is lecturing them about the kind of life they should be leading. And they have outgrown this institution and they are looking for the things we have to offer, but they don't know yet that we're out there. Number two, when you and me begin to share more about the real story about Master Rabbi Jesus's life, there was a huge sin committed by the church, right? Huge sin. And that sin's called the dirty word work, W-O-R-K. In other words, the work that Master Rabbi Jesus had to also do on himself. Because if I take that out of the Bible, see, if I take 16 to 17 years of training, transformation, working on yourself, enlightenment, like his best friend John says, I saw him grow from grace to grace. Now, I pull that out of the Bible, and all I leave in the Bible is bar mitzvah age. He's in the temple preaching. And the next thing, he's being baptized at 30 in the River Jordan. I take out all of that. It makes it really easy to force people to have to turn to one person for everything. It creates codependency in the process. And because you took work out of the person that 3 billion people on the planet call master, boy, you messed them up silly. On top of that, convince them that he was poor. Now you have done a sin of sin, because it's easy for these people to have what I call the lotto fever mindset. Push a button, pop a pill. I don't have to do anything. I'm saved. He's taking care of anything. Why should I have to work on myself? It's also why they're having difficulty waking up. And it's also, more importantly, Simon, they wake up, but they stay at step one, and they have a really hard time going to step two.
No, I think you've absolutely said what's happening to humanity. I think back to my school days, which would have been in the 60s and the 70s. And it was very fashionable, because if you were trying to emulate goodness, then you had to be poor. If you were not good, you were rich. And yet, that story is then run on the railroad line next to, it's good to idolize pop stars. It's good to idolize Hollywood. And so people are told that they need to be poor because that makes them good, but they need to aspire to a football player or a pop star, because that's the idol that you look at, because they must be successful, because they're making a lot of money. And this is how humanity, I believe, has been very cleverly split down the middle in its own mind, fractured. And one of the things that talking to you on our regular basis, I hope, does is bring this back, so that it's actually a truth that you don't have to be poor to be spiritual. You can be a rich man or rich woman. The question is, what do you do with your money? Because that dictates whether you're a good person or a bad person.
Simon, so true. You're so spot on. I did, the first time we offered an online course was 2013.
Okay.
And I did 3 courses at 3 different stages. And we're in the process of completely redoing all these courses. And the first course got my first book, The Circle of Life, right? That gave the aspects of how you connect with the spirit and the energy. The second course was called Awaken and Remember, which is based on someone going through second birth, their Kundalini experience, and what that looks like on the other side. The third course I did was called The Science of Abundance. And I did 2 things in The Science of Abundance. I taught the 9 pillars of prosperity that have been in the lamasery for 3 million years, that some of these go back to the Babylonian time, some of these truths, right? But halfway in each thing, I would take the story of Jesus and I would tell them the real story. So it was a 45-minute broadcast. About 20 minutes was done about the pillar of abundance, and then the next chapter on Jesus. That's what we did. Well, the interesting thing was, when I did the Awake and the Wake series and talked about Kundalini and longevity, and even the possibility of physical immortality, I got more people tuning into that when I offered the Science of Abundance and told the true story of Jesus being born as a king who had wealth beyond what you could imagine. And it's okay to be rich and spiritual, because we might want to be good stewards of God's heavenly money, since it doesn't belong to us anyhow, right?
Yes.
I got not 1/10 of the response, and that told us everything, Simon.
Interesting, because Jesus can trace a line back to the pharaohs, Jesus can trace a line to Egypt, and then the controllers never wanted us to understand that he was a ruler from family line in the physical world, and had come from a line of families that were deeply revered and respected. They wanted the story of a man in rags, barefoot, who was very easy, therefore, to make a fool of, very easy to push out from the roles of power, and to make a big difference. So it's no wonder that people have struggled to try to understand who the Jesus figure or character is, and what's the truth and what isn't the truth. And frankly, Lama, when people trying to pay their mortgage or their rent or their hire purchase and feed the children, how anybody has time to do a meditation, because the system is deliberately stopping people from looking inside themselves.
Exactly. See, we have a different spin-off, but in some sense, what's going on in the world now is just as much slavery as the Hebrew people under Egyptian captivity. Because the mindset is, if you give people a small piece of really what they should have, and then you tax that, which most people would say that's illegal, and then you not only, in our parents' generation, one person could make a good living and the other one could take care of the children. And we had this wholesome family entity. Now you make 2 to 3 people. In the Philippines, where my wife is from, in order to make the house economically go, when the peso is 46 to the US dollar,
Right.
it takes 3 to 4 adults contributing to that household to make it work. And they're lucky if they can show up for a 45-minute Catholic Mass on Saturday or Sunday, let alone sit down and pray the rosary for 30 minutes or something. That's almost unheard of. So the idea is keep people so busy that they can't work on themselves spiritually, because Tai Chi Gong is an inside game. It's not an outside game. And it's teaching people to take prayer beads, to breathe energy, to move in a way that induces energy. Because what's going to happen is that with this energy and being connected with the intrinsic energy, we all know already has a higher intelligence than the person does in their physical consciousness. Yeah. So the more I connect with my higher self, with my Christ-like being, who is 5D and beyond, right? Well, obviously, they're going to impart on you things that makes everything in the world look totally foolish, absolutely foolish. And we call them out on this. This is why in scripture it says, greater is thee that is in me than is in the world. Kind of sums up the whole gospel in a sense. According to Lamasery, that affirmation kind of sums it all up. If we can teach people, start to communicate here on a regular basis, that heaven and God the Father lives right here, and we're going to show them on 6 different ways to connect. What's beautiful about that is, as the saying is, mind's a wonderful servant, it is a bad master, right? So when the mind doesn't want to cooperate to the divine, okay, I can breathe the divine's energy. Okay, I'm connected. Oh, if I don't want to breathe it because I have some birth trauma going on right now unconsciously, I can move in a way that I can move in his energy, right? If I go out and I get sun and the energy from the moon, it's not only making me peaceful and giving me vitamin D, but there is an intrinsic connection from the radiation of the sun bouncing off the earth. Then those ultraviolets come up. And isn't it interesting that the prism of light they bounce off is exactly correspond to my 7 colors of my 7 chakras,
Yes.
which will stimulate not us folks in the chakras. They'll stand at attention. It'll send chi into the neuros, and everything's connected. And my brain again is connected to higher intelligence. They know that. That's why they wanted to box us up, keep us inside, keep us from communicating, and definitely keep us from accessing energy. Because if we do, that's why on my site, Simon, you'll love this, is that I give people 45-day challenge. I know we have seen this for 20 years. If people go in, they read the book, and if they work about 20 minutes a day for 45 days, they're done. They will always have a connection to the divine the rest of their life. And the outside authority people lose complete hold of them.
Absolutely wonderful. Well said. And, you know, in the world to come, imagine the shopping mall where there's a strip of grass down the center where people can take their shoes off and connect with the earth rather than this complete insulating concrete. There are just a couple of things I want to say because we're going to have to wrap up soon. Because
sure,
we always do really well, you and I.
We're having too much fun.
Yeah, well, why not? You talked about the preacher in the regular church, right, and the congregation, and of course, you know, that for me, as I'm talking to you, you know, I can't help it, but I've got to say, well, where the student outperforms the master, and that's what that is. But the other thing is that you talked about the peso, and you know, Iraq is a very important country, and at the moment, there are just under 2,000 Iraqi dinar to the British pound.
Wow.
Now, that is, you know, from the 3D perspective, people will say, oh, that's good. I can go on a foreign holiday and take my British pounds and I'll be able to buy so many things. What they don't appreciate is that the people who live there are almost in a medieval type of existence. And so what we're hoping for with this revaluation, which I know you're very familiar with, is where it doesn't have to be on a one-to-one basis, but it has to be close enough so that sovereignty is returned to sovereign governments, which are by the people. So look, well, I will wrap it up. It is always lovely to speak to you, and I hope that our talks, you know, are interesting for people, because the Jesus story is not just something that happened 2,000 years ago. It is something that's happening now. You know, I think it's worth our while each time we talk to look at another aspect of his life.
Absolutely.
And I'd love to do that, if you're okay with that.
Oh, absolutely, because you're right. He's not only a model, but the whole stage of his life is an example of us going through the second birth and coming out on, is, as we were saying recently on the Patriot and the Llama show with Demi Swin, we were talking, you know, the real thing that people need to be focusing is him coming out of the tomb and the 40 days after. Yes. Because he had a physical body, not just a spiritual body. He had merged them. And we need to talk about that to your people for sure.
Well, let's do that. Let's do that for the next one.
Sounds good.
Because that is it's a message of hope, but based on truth and reality. All right, listen, God bless.
God bless you, Simon. Best of Becky. Take care.
Oh, thanks ever so much. Take care.
Bye-bye.